here, and in this video drill I'll start working on the fingerboards. I'll get them inlaid, tapered, fretted, side position dots put on, and all ready to go. So keep watching. It's time to start working on the fingerboard for the builds I'm going to be working on. And I do already have one slotted here, but I need to do some prep work before I do any inlay work on it. First thing I really want to do is just to make sure that I've got a good flat board on the back, because these boards have been resting in the shop for a while. So I'll just chalk up the back, and I'm just going to take it on a 100 grit very flat sanding surface. And see if I have any high or low spots on there. As you can tell. Okay, well, with the back of my fingerboard perfectly flat now, I can start worrying about the top. I want to go ahead and make sure that my 16-inch radius on the top is pure all the way down and there's no real rough spots or flat spots on it. So I'm going to do that over here on a little different jig. Now that I've got the back of my fingerboard flat, I want to work on the top and make sure that my 16-inch radius is just where it needs to be. So I've got a real flat board here that is clamped into my bench vise and secured in there. And once again, I'm going to put some chalk on the face of it so I can tell when I get to where I need to be. And I have some 16-inch radius sanding beans, and I'm just going to go over the face of the fingerboard. Okay, now that I know that I've got my 16-inch radius smooth on my fingerboard, I can go ahead and mark my center lines and take it over and start cutting the pockets so that I can inlay it. Well, with my fingerboard flat on the bottom, I've got it radiused and the fret slots are cut, and I've gotten all of my inlay pockets done. It's time to go ahead and put the inlays into this fingerboard. Now, this was the test fingerboard that I did, which was made out of rosewood. I made sure that I cut my fret slots in the appropriate locations, and then all of my inlay pockets were cut and the pearl pieces cut out and stuck in there just to make sure I've got them right. Now it's just time to go ahead and stick them into the fingerboard that they're actually going to live in. I'm just going to take a little piece of tape, transfer them. Then with all of my pearl pieces in the fingerboard where they're supposed to go, I'm going to start with my little Celtic knots and take some ebony dust. And then with a small brush, I'm just going to take and distribute that dust down into the little cracks maybe left there. And then once I've got the dust down into the what little cracks may be left between the inlay and the pocket, I'm just going to take some super glue, just flood that area. Super glue's real thin, it'll just wick itself right in there, even on the bottom. So I'm going to continue on with this process till I get them all glued in, and then we'll, when it's dry, sand everything down flush. Well, my glued in inlays have dried. I'm going to go ahead and take a little sanding beam and sand them down. This is a 16-inch radius sanding beam, which is the same as my fingerboard, and I've got a 120 grit on this one. Well, I've sanded down with the 120, and then I switched over to some 220 to get it final sanded here. And so here's our inlays. Celtic circles and the Celtic knots. I've got the inlays sanded down on my fingerboard, and the fret slots are there, and I have marked center lines and then the profile for the fingerboard, and I just need to trim to that on the bandsaw. I've got it rough cut out to its final dimensions, and I'll just need to fine tune the sides, get all the bandsaw marks off of there and get it right down to where it needs to be. To sand my fingerboard smooth on the sides where I've run them through the bandsaw, I'm just going to take a piece of, this is actually 100 grit here, and lay it on my workbench. And to keep it, make sure I keep it level, I'm just going to use a little right angle guide that I made, and I'm just going to sand this down to where it needs to be. Once I've gotten this to the proper dimensions, which I really already have, and to get those straight line scratches out that were left by running it through that piece of sandpaper, you know, on the same direction, go to a little finer grit, and then just kind of go sideways a little bit like this, and that'll get those straight line scratches out of my fingerboard. So these fingerboards are ready for the next step. We'll do these side position dots at the 3, 5, 7, 9, 12, and 15. Well, it's time to put the dots on the fingerboard that are position markers on the side of the fingerboard. This is the fingerboard for the 3-piece walnut, and I have already put the little 3mm abalone dots on it. And this is how I go about that. Now the fingerboard's tapered, and I'm going to be drilling these dots out on the drill press. So I want to have a level fingerboard so that when I set my depth gauge on my drill press, I don't have to reset it each time I come down to a different fret marker. So what I've done is basically just taken a little wedge of wood and mounted it underneath the fingerboard. And then I just have another little board which has some shelf liner on it, since the fingerboard's arched, that I put on top of that, and then align my numbers up, and just clamping this little sandwich together. Now, position markers go at the 3, 5, 7, 9, 12, 15, and 17 fret locations. So the first thing I want to do is just find the center between each of those frets. Next, I'm going to mark the center of my fingerboard. Now, with my positions marked, I'm just going to take a little awl and start a little hole right where I need that drill bit to go into. Okay, so I'm just going to take that over the drill bit and drill some holes. Now my dots are 3mm abalone dots, and the drill bit that I'm using is 120 thousandths of an inch brad point bit, which equals out to about 3.05 millimeters. So let's go over the drill press and I'll drill these out. With my holes drilled, I can start mounting my 3mm side position markers, but the first thing I want to do is go ahead and erase any of the little blue lines left on the side of my fingerboard. Okay, start here with number 3, and then put my dot in. The dots are a snug fit, and I want to make sure that they get seated down in there. So just a little felt hammer, and then just a little caul and a little love tap, and that puts them in there without cracking them. Just to be on the safe side, I'm going to do the same thing that I've done with my inlays on the fingerboard. Is just take a little bit of ebony dust and just kind of brush it over them. Brush that ebony dust over the inlay. If there's any little gaps there, then that dust will settle down in there. Now we'll just take a little bit of glue. And once again, just flood that area just a little bit. All right. Well, the inlays are dry on my fingerboard. So my side position dots are installed. Now I just need to sand them down smooth. And a piece of sandpaper and a right angle to help me make sure that I keep the fingerboard square to the work surface. And there's our side position dot inlays installed in the fingerboard. The next step in fingerboard preparation is to get ready for installing the frets. And what I want to do is to clean the fret slots out. But before I actually do that, I want to take a little file. And this is just a small triangle file. And I want to kill the sharp edges left by the CNC cutting the fret slot. So that edge right here of the fingerboard meeting the fret slot is real sharp. I'm just going to take this file and very carefully just kind of kill those sharp edges. Well, my fingerboards are ready for the next step, which is to be installing the frets. I've got them inlaid and everything's all done. Next step is just going to be to go ahead and install the frets. I have some fret wire picked out that I'm going to use. Before I even do anything to the fret wire, I want to go ahead and clean it to get any processing oils or films that might be left on there off. And that's easier to do on a straight length than it is going to be after I put it into the proper curvature. And you can see what I've gotten off of this one, just with a little acetone. So after I clean the fret wire off, I'm going to go ahead and put it through my little bender here and put the appropriate curvature in it. Well, with my fret wire cleaned and arched to what I need for my fingerboard, it's time to just go ahead and start cutting them to length. And then I'm just going to mark my links and cut them to width. Well, I have all my frets cut to length for 2 sets of fingerboards, and I'm ready to start the fretting process. And when I fret my guitars, I do not put in the 1st fret or the 10th fret, because those 2 fret slot locations I use for indexing. Start with the number 2 fret, and I just use a little bit of white glue dipped in a old guitar string that I'm going to use to help seat that fret in there. So number 2 fret, position it in place. Okay, there's one down, and I've got more to do. Well, now that the fingerboard has been fretted and I've had it clamped up for a week or so while I was doing some other things, it's time to go ahead and level off the frets to the edge of the fingerboard. I can use a pair of fret nippers here and cut those off. Well, with the majority of the overhangs nipped off, now it's time to go ahead and file the other ones down smooth. So I've got a couple of boards here that are fingerboard shaped that I'm just going to kind of put the fingerboard between and then put it in this little vise here. Before I clamp it down all the way, I want to make sure that my fingerboard is level with the 2 sacrificial boards that it's clamped between. Okay. Now with the fingerboard clamped between the 2 sacrificial boards, I can simply take a file and go across them, and the file was going to be pushing into the fret, to push the fret into the fret slot, not pulling it out. So I'm just going to file it. Now that I filed the fret smooth on the side with that method you just saw, I'm just going to take my file and just go down the length of the fingerboard like this. Okay, now with this fingerboard fretted and the frets trimmed to the end, clamp it back in its 16-inch radius until I need it again. This kind of helps flatten the fingerboard back out. Okay, and I'll just put that aside while I work on the other fingerboard. Well, that finishes up this video journal on the fingerboard. It's ready to go. The next step will be working on the necks. If you enjoy my content, well, you know what to do. And if you'd like to support the channel, there is a link down below where you can do that. Thank you all so much for watching.